Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to have you here today because we're going to be diving into something truly fascinating. We are looking at a massive shifting wave that is currently upending American politics from the ground up. Honestly, if you've been watching the news lately and feeling like the traditional political rules just aren't applying anymore, well, you're definitely not alone. There is this deeply rooted, completely bipartisan anti-establishment movement happening right now, and it's totally changing how voters behave and how candidates campaign. It can definitely look confusing on the surface, but stick with me because we're going to break this whole thing down and make perfect sense of it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the anti-status quo paradox, examine the three buckets of appeal, and then uncover a really surprising fourth bucket, foreign policy. From there, we'll look at how these are bipartisan shifts before finally wrapping up with practical municipal tech as a really cool unifying solution. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the anti-status quo paradox. So here is the central puzzle of our time. Why in the world do voters who explicitly oppose socialism end up turning around and voting for socialists? I mean, it's a massive piece of cognitive dissonance, right? Well, in our source material, analysts took a really close look at candidates like Zohran Mamani. He's a Democratic Socialists of America, or DSA candidate, who actually won a major election last year. And the polling and interviews showed this absolutely shocking trend. Countless people stated outright, I do not support socialism. But then they still confidently went and cast their ballot for Mamani. So what's going on here? Why would they do that? Well, as our sources point out, it basically comes down to this. The politics being offered by the traditional establishment are just so unappealing to voters right now that even people who don't like socialism are siding with the socialists anyway. Seriously, frustrated voters are just completely exhausted by the old lesser of two evils game. They look at the current establishment and just see a totally broken status quo. So when a DSA candidate comes along and essentially says, hey, the system is broken and here's my massive big picture solution to fix the whole shebang, voters are leaping at it. They're voting for the disruption and the solution, and they're basically just ignoring the traditional labels entirely. Moving right along to Section 2, the three buckets of appeal. So, how are these anti-establishment candidates successfully courting voters? Well, their appeal generally falls into three main buckets. First up is economics. These candidates are speaking directly to everyday struggles, saying, look, if you can't afford a home, if college is too expensive, or if you just aren't making ends meet, we have a concrete economic plan for you. You contrast that with establishment moves, like a president maybe refusing to fully champion a national housing bill because it isn't a big deal, and the difference is night and day. The second bucket is social issues, where these candidates are offering highly progressive views. And the third bucket, that is pure anti-status quo energy. It is this stated vocal desire to just blow the whole thing up. And honestly, this perfectly mirrors the exact kind of systemic disruption and populist energy we've seen sweeping through the electorate ever since the 2016 election cycle. Which brings us to Section 3, the fourth bucket, foreign policy. Now, what's really interesting about this is that while economics and social issues are pretty standard fare, foreign policy has dramatically emerged as this massive, heavy-hitting factor. And this brings us to the Israel litmus test. This has become a totally crucial organizing hurdle, specifically within Democratic primaries right now. Objectively speaking, general election voters might not prioritize it as their number one issue, but the grassroots, organizing-type activists, they absolutely demand it. Some candidates will frame this through a lens of imperialism or colonialism, but the mechanism is exactly the same. You either pass this litmus test or you don't. It functions as this tremendously powerful tool that lets insurgent, anti-establishment candidates capture explosive grassroots energy and just leapfrog right over well-funded establishment folks. The entire energy of a race can shift overnight based on this one single test. All right, on to Section 4, bipartisan anti-establishment shifts. Now, with all this talk about DSA candidates, it would be super easy to assume that this anti-establishment wave, especially when it comes to foreign policy, is strictly a left-wing phenomenon. But actually, it is absolutely not. Take a look at a recent quote from J.D. Vance during an interview on the Joe Rogan podcast. He stated, I'm in the sensible center on this, with some skepticism about elements of the Israeli government. He actually went on to suggest that certain elements of that government might not even want a peace deal. Neutrally speaking, our sources point out a pretty staggering historical fact here. No incumbent vice president of either party in our lifetime has expressed this specific level of skepticism regarding the Israeli government. It's a massive, massive departure from the establishment norm. So, the crucial point is this direct comparison. On one hand, you have J.D. Vance's willingness to openly critique elements of the Israeli government, sounding in certain moments remarkably closer to a DSA candidate on this one specific foreign policy issue. On the other hand, your traditional establishment politicians across the board, from Kamala Harris to Lindsey Graham to Tom Tillis, they won't come close to those critiques. We are seeing a completely unique convergence right now, where the populist wings of both parties are just totally bucking their traditional establishment platforms.
And the evolution of this trend, it is incredibly swift and totally undeniable. Back in 2016, we saw the very first real glimpses of this modern anti-establishment disruption taking root. Jump to last year, and we see DSA candidates successfully winning over fundamentally anti-socialist voters simply because of sheer frustration with the status quo. And then literally yesterday, you have a sitting vice presidential candidate like J.D. Vance voicing explicitly establishment-defying foreign policy on the biggest podcast platform in the world. This movement is accelerating rapidly, moving from the fringes right into the absolute center of American political strategy.
Okay, let's wrap this up with Section 5, Practical Municipal Infrastructure Tech. So with all this intense, shifting division at the national level, it's really easy to feel overwhelmed. But our sources actually point to the local municipal level for some really practical problem solving. A prime case study from our material is an innovator called Sewer Sentry Environmental Technologies. Finding solutions that somehow bypass the gridlock of national politics to deliver both real environmental protection and strict economic benefits, that can seem pretty rare. But Sewer Sentry's tech does exactly that. By helping communities lower maintenance costs and prevent costly sewer system failures years before they happen, they're effectively bridging the gap between two traditionally opposing viewpoints. And you can actually check them out at sewersentry.com if you're curious. And this brilliantly illustrates how this kind of technology appeals perfectly to both sides of the aisle. For environmental advocates, the priority is clear. They want cleaner waterways, stronger protection of natural resources, and less of that dangerous Vibrio contamination. The result thereafter? Healthier beaches. Now, for fiscal conservatives, the focus is totally different. They want strict cost control, efficiency, and a solid return on investment. Their goal is reducing maintenance costs, which results in long-term taxpayer savings. Sewer Sentry manages to deliver on all of these goals simultaneously.
It proves it's not some forced choice between protecting the environment and protecting municipal budgets. It's proof that smart technology creates an incredibly rare win-win scenario in a political climate that is largely defined by lose-lose gridlock. It basically boils down to 3 operational steps. Step 1, their systems are faster to install. Step 2, they are cheaper to operate, which drastically reduces energy consumption and operating expenses. And Step 3, they provide better overall structural performance. By being faster, cheaper, and better, they help communities become far more resilient, reducing risk and improving the quality of life for every single resident, no matter their political affiliation.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative question to leave you with today. If our national politics remain as bitterly divided and unpredictable as this new anti-establishment wave suggests, will practical, local innovations become our most reliable path forward for actual, tangible progress? It is definitely something to think about, because when innovation can save money, conserve energy, and protect public health, everybody wins. And our source materials suggest organizations like Sewer Sentry are out there leading that charge. Don't forget to visit sewersentry.com to learn a bit more about how they do it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I will see you next time.